road trip continues for the Erie Otters. From here in Buffalo, they'll travel to Sault Ste. Marie to play the Greyhounds. They have the second best record currently in the OHL. Reporting from First Niagara Arena in Buffalo, I'm Gary Drapcho for the Sports Blitz. Teaching the sport of soccer here, trying to make it a prime sport now in the future for Puerto Rico. It starts right here with the young kids at the High Performance Academy. I'm Gary Drapcho reporting. All right, thank you, John. We're here at the Peak, and it is a 2018 LECOM Health Challenge that was second to none. 22 under par by this guy, Nelson Ledesma on WSCE at 6:30 kickoff. I'm Gary Drapcho reporting from Super Bowl 50. Back to you. The Indians and Cubs all tied up at 1 game apiece. I'm Gary Drapcho reporting from Progressive Field in Cleveland in the 2016 World Series for Erie Sports Now.
The bright, positive light continues to burn in the Erie News Now Sports Department. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Ruzzi along with John Leidick. And today we are here in the sports offices of Erie News Now to celebrate the tremendous life of Gary Drapcho.
So much magic happened right here with Gary and his sports life and his sports ventures. Over the next half hour, we're going to show you what his impact was, the legacy, and the total involvement in the Erie community. We start with a look back from the very beginning.
The tension is building, and it looks like it will be a great showdown. Super Bowl 21. Hello, I'm Gary Drapcho, Newswatch 35 Sports.
From the very beginning, he was destined to become an Erie sports legend.
Hi, I'm Gary Drapcho. WSCE Newswatch 35 is proud to debut Insta Sports.
From the court,
Newswatch 35 Sports.
To the ice.
Seemed destined to be a showcase for the Otters.
Gary made sure he was there to tell the story.
As you can see, Steelers training camp is in full swing.
New to Erie sports in 1984, when he came to the area, Gary immersed himself in everything northwestern Pennsylvania had to offer.
Like basketball, wrestling, or swimming.
From the sky to the water, it was Gary giving you what you wanted to see.
It's more than scores and highlights. It's an insight into the game.
Beyond the sports landscape, Gary Drapcho gave back to help local communities receive what they needed most.
Share your love of reading with a child. Sign up to be a reading pal.
But what separated Mr. Sports from most for the last 35 years was his enthusiasm and excitement to bring each and every event right to you.
Hockey is a very physical, fast-paced, exciting game.
Your Erie sports personality, a colleague, but most importantly, our friend.
Gary, I'm honored to have gotten to know you over the past year. I came here to Erie 6 hours away from home and didn't know anyone, and you truly became a friend. And we worked hard back here in our sports area, but we got to know each other well. And I'm happy to have that time with you. And as a young sports reporter, you've truly helped me grow so much in this business and as a person as well. And whenever I would show up to events, you would know every single person there. People would come up to you, shake your hand, and have a smile on their face, and you would have one back to them. And that just showed me the type of leader I had that I was working for, and the type of person you were and how much you meant to this Erie community. And I just want to thank you for this time and everything that you've done for me. Thank you.
Mike, Gary had so many great opportunities while covering sports in Erie.
Yeah, John, from local high school championships all the way to the biggest stage in sports, the Super Bowl. Gary had the opportunity to cover multiple Super Bowls. He covered the Stanley Cup, the World Series, and the NBA Final.
He also covered 2 Otters OHL title runs, the U.S. Open on multiple occasions, and his favorite over 40 years, Penn State sports. He was also a voter for the Heisman.
And so many people were blessed with the opportunity to work with Gary and call him a friend like us.
One of those people who Gary met from the very beginning was Ron Surtz. He shared many thoughts on the passing of his longtime friend.
Oh, you know what? It's Gary and I go back a long ways. He's such a great guy and a good friend and a consummate professional. just loves sports. I feel we almost grew up together. The first year he was in town at WSEE. It was the first year I was running the Cathedral Prep athletic program and the McDonald's Classic, and I knew right away that first year it actually was televised by WSEE, and Gary did the play-by-play and I did the color, and I knew right away within 2 minutes he was a professional and I was a dunce. Gary got it right away. I mean, in the other things I was involved with, he understood the pro sports and the high school sports. But I wasn't certain too many people were going to catch on right away about the role of sports in tourism and growth of that area of Erie. But he did. He saw the non-traditional sports. He saw the difference it made for Erie. Right away understood the different nature of what we were trying to do to bring people to town through these various other non-traditional sports. And he couldn't have been more supportive. I'm not sure the Sports Commission would have got off to the start that it did without Gary's support. You know, you could always count on him. He was real consistent. Things that you'd never know whether he loved something, hated something. He was always had a way of talking to you like you were a friend, and delivering the right information and asking the right questions, and making certain that his broadcast was relevant to the whole Erie community involving sports.
Well, he came here a complete outsider. He didn't know anybody, and as I think we've seen over the last few days, everyone in Erie thinks they know him, and they do. He's been coming into their houses 2 or 3 times a day for the last 35 years, 5 days a week. If you could get Gary to laugh, that was it. It was great, because he had a great laugh, great sense of humor. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I almost always tried during the sports to say something in his ear through the earpiece to get him to laugh. Very friendly, very compassionate. I know that he was one of the first people that came to the funeral home when my mom died last year. And it wasn't like, oh, I work with him, I have to go. It was like an actual gesture of a friend, and I really appreciated that. And I was talking with my sister earlier today, and she said she remembered Gary coming to the hospital when my first son was born 30 years ago. And again, you don't have to do that you don't necessarily go to one of your coworkers to the hospital when they have a child, but he was that kind of guy.
From the first day I met Gary, I knew he was one of a kind. I spent many Friday nights racing around the region, getting highlights of football and basketball games for Gary's show, and I came back one night and realized I didn't have the winning shot that I thought I had. I told Gary, and Gary said, well, that's okay. Let's take a look what you do have. He goes, we'll make it work. You know, and that was Gary. He was a mentor to dozens of sports reporters, up-and-coming interns, willing to coach them up and help them out with kind words and advice. Gary was bigger than life. His big laugh, booming voice. Gary, we all miss you, and you will never be replaced.
And Gary had so many great opportunities while covering sports in Erie. Over 35 years in Erie, sports, Gary developed shows and segments that were uniquely his, without a doubt.
It's certainly, Mike, and one of his favorite parts of the week, and I got to see it each and every week, was when he was able to welcome in his Sunday Sports Blitz guests. The show that aired every Sunday on WSEE, Gary not only focused on the biggest topics in sports, he made sure that the non-traditional sports had their moment to shine.
No doubt, from champions cheer to a broom ball event and everything in between. Gary gave so many the platform to introduce their sports to the community and maybe even give others the chance to discover a new love they never knew existed. The Erie Sports Commission, a main staple of this show, bringing athletic events to the area. And Gary gave them a sounding board to promote the great opportunities for Erie to enjoy.
We were bringing in a lot of unique sports, not your traditional stick and ball sports. And the Sunday Sports Blitz provided us with a platform to talk about these not non-traditional sports, and the great part about it was that Gary embraced that opportunity. And anytime when I was the events director and came in, and later Emily Biddle took over as the marketing and communications person, but anytime we reached out to Gary and said, hey, we want to talk about this, are you up for it? Gary always answered in the affirmative, and gave us an opportunity to promote some sports that certainly didn't fall into the mainstream category. He certainly had the ability to take anything he was given and make it the most important thing he was talking about at that time. And again, frankly, some of those things he'd never heard of before, but he welcomed them with open arms. He did his homework to make sure he knew as much about it as possible. But I also think there was a part of him when he did those interviews with the non-traditional sports that was impressive, because he always allowed the guest to explain really what it was all about, and he didn't want to act as the main person in that interview. Well, obviously he's an icon, irreplaceable. How many people work the same job at the same station for that many years and do it as well as Gary did it? I think he has impacted thousands of athletes' lives. How excited they would be to be interviewed by Gary Drapcho, and looking forward to seeing what was going to be on TV, or getting to see something that was taped and watching it after the fact.
Mike, another of Gary's major loves, hitting the links and finding a way to just enjoy whatever putting green he could find.
Those are really great clips to watch, and he turned that passion into From the Fairway segment, helping local golfers and even maybe himself find tips to improve their games. Let's take a look.
From the Fairway, amateurs would like to hit the ball longer. Chris Kibnewski, the local EDGA match play champion, is a good example. He's not big in stature, yet he hits it long and straight. And we had teaching pro Dave Smith explain why.
Has not been a big, strapping, tall player. He's always been on the small side. But when he comes through, go back. Now slowly go to your left side. Right, he's bigger than the average bear right here. This distance between that club head and his left shoulder, that is a lot of width right there. And that's another power source that being on your left side gives you. It allows you to move the club down the line longer instead of coming off the line when you're not on your left foot.
And Dave has Chris do a simple one-step drill to emphasize the weight transfer. Well, if you get into the right rhythm, the right weight transfer, and the right position of the club, you just may do it next time from the fairway.
At first, I was a little intimidated. He's been there forever, watching him, and I can remember, in high school and college, seeing him at the games a lot. I played football, so I saw him on the sidelines a lot. And, you didn't want to mess up. It's like, especially when he started shooting games, oh gosh, I don't want to make Gary mad. But, after a while, you get friendly and, joking around in the newsroom and stuff like that. Gary had a premiere party on the same night he was supposed to see the Rolling Stones. And I ended up getting his tickets. He gave them to me, said, I can't go, so somebody's got to use them. So I'm like, from there on, we were best buds.
Gary was one of them, immediately open arms. He welcomed me into the group, and I'll just never forget that voice.
Hi everyone, from the fairway today. The 2018 EDGA golf season is about to begin.
I always remember him in a zip-up Penn State hoodie or jacket. He lived and breathed Penn State. Sitting next to him and just being inches away when he would broadcast and feeling whatever he was saying, whatever he was going to be telling us, and that excitement in his voice.
Gary dedicated himself to providing the best sports coverage in northwestern Pennsylvania, but also a devoted member of the community.
Gary's passions were to spotlight athletes and reach out a hand to help wherever and whenever he was needed. A resident of Harbor Creek, Gary looked forward to serving as the Master of Ceremonies each year for the Hall of Fame, where he helped honor the greats of the Harbor Creek athletic community, many of whom he covered when they were students at the school and watched them grow up throughout his and their career. Gary relished the chance to look back on the history of the community he called home and celebrate the accomplishments and milestones of so many Harbor Creek athletes.
To have him be in our school district, in our community, and an active parent when his kids were going through the school, or covering the Harbor Creek happenings in sports and that. It was just always such a positive atmosphere when he was there to be a part of it and kind of showcase some of what was going on at Harbor Creek. Him being able to kind of show that marching band footage on a Friday night football show, I think was trend-setting, to a point. But he was always very complimentary of everybody's talents. It wasn't just the athletes. It was the kids in the extracurricular activities, the academic clubs, the performing arts, everything like that. He did such a good job. And you could definitely see that proud dad smile come out. Whether it was, the stories he told me about, covering the Super Bowl all the way down to, emceeing some high school Hall of Fame banquet, sort of thing. He embraced it, and it was the most important activity at that point. And I think the way he would embrace his career and put that amount of professionalism and that energy into it, I think it's just something that speaks to his character, and I think that is something that will be looked upon as a huge impact that he had.
Jack Lee and his wife love the Irish parade.
And Gary was also involved with the Erie St. Patrick's Parade. He served as the master of ceremonies for many years, announcing each and every float that came by. In the week prior to the parade, he served as the MC of the St. Patrick's Parade dinner. From band competitions to announcing all-star games, Gary gave as much to sports as he did to the local community.
Just wanted to give you a short story about Gary Drapcho. What a great guy he was. 1996 at Mercyhurst University, I did my sports internship with him at WSCE Channel 35, and he was a great leader, a really great leader, and he hired me and got my start in TV. So Gary, rest in peace.
I was always struck by his passion for local sports. He was a firm believer that to get some of the stories that we were covering, that we should go on the road and travel to different places, whether that was for NFL games to the regional sites of Buffalo, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, or to high school venues in downstate. I thought his work at that level was really important to the local community and promoting high school sports, and something that he did throughout more than 35 years.
I was privileged to work with him and share a set with him for 17 years, and I know personally he taught me so much about sports. He actually kind of spoiled me, Mike, because when I got here in the late 80s, I wasn't exactly the world's biggest sports fan, and he made everything so exciting. I don't care if it was horseshoes or the most important thing in the world. He made it so exciting, sitting there and listening to his highlights all those years. And we were truly in the trenches together, and then we go out the lefties together. We hung out. And then as we started to get married and have children, we cared about each other's children. We cared about each other's lives. It was just, to this day, you go on Facebook and I'm seeing tributes from people that I worked with years ago that we worked with for so long over the years, commanded respect. When he walked into a locker room or he walked into an arena, people thought it was kind of cool that he was there. And I agree with that. It was cool that he was there. He's Erie.
Among the many lives Gary touched, a former competitor in the TV business became a lifelong friend.
From their times as young men in Erie to the dedication to a long-standing local charity, Doug White shares his thoughts on the life of Gary Drapcho.
When he came to town in 1984, I was working at Channel 12, and he was down at Channel 35, and And in that time, you had a bit of separation. I mean, now you guys are all in the same building, but back then you really weren't supposed to play with the other guys in the neighborhood. And but we never really worried too much about that. We spent a lot of time together. We were both young and single and having fun, and so we got a chance to spend a lot of time. Then as we, got older and I got involved in the Save an Eye game, Gary was, just a tremendous help with that thing. And the business that you guys are in, sometimes, your on-air persona is different than what you are off camera. And, what you saw is what you got. I mean, he was just, he's a good-natured guy, and I don't think I ever saw him in, 38 years or whatever, mad. Well, he covered World Series and Super Bowls and all that stuff. And although, I'm sure he enjoyed it, I think he was happiest when he had that camera on his shoulder and he was down in some gym someplace taking, footage of basketball games all around the county and on the sidelines during a football game or doing the Blitz or Friday night shows that he did. I think that's when he was happiest. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I know the World Series and all that stuff are big deals and everything else, but I think he was happiest when he was showcasing kids. And quite frankly, whoever's watching this show, if you had kids that played high school or collegiate sports in Erie for 30-some years, you ought to thank him because he got your kids a lot of airtime.
I'm often asked to give a 2 or 3 minute eulogy on someone and capture their life. And that's virtually impossible. And then when you come to an individual like Gary Drapcho, it's beyond the scope of our imagining that you could capture him in 2 or 3 minutes. Gary was this giant of a man who looked like he could take on the world, and yet he was the most gentle and caring human being I think I've ever known. Gary had a great passion about everything. He had a passion for life. He had a passion for his 3 daughters. He loved them beyond anything. He had a great passion for sports, particularly young people. And he had a great passion for St. Patrick's. And I can tell you that I feel a sense of emptiness in this room right now, knowing that he won't be back here to lead us in song. I once complimented him and said that you do a great job with these 16 and 17-year-old kids, interviewing them about their athletic accomplishments and making them feel good. And he looked at me dumbfounded and he said, "Father, do you have any clue how hard it is to get a 15 or 16-year-old boy to talk, let alone talk about himself?" And I said, "I don't know, Gary, but you do it." And he did. It wasn't as much about the game as it was about the individual. And he made those kids just beam with pride at their athletic accomplishments. I think in the final analysis, we're all going to be judged and remembered, not by what we accomplish in this life, not by what we accumulate or what milestones we set. We're going to be remembered and judged by how we touched the hearts of others. And Gary Drapcho touched our hearts. That's why we all feel so bad today. And all I can say is I give thanks to my God that we had the privilege of having him, albeit as brief a moment as it was, because we're all better people for him. And Gary, trust me, we'll not forget you.
John, I'll never forget working Friday Night Football with him when he went out to Harbor Creek, not only to cover the Huskies, but to see his girls in the band. He loved that. And then when he came back a few years ago for Dan Carr's induction to the Hall of Fame, he was on vacation, came back to interview him.
Yeah, he was such a special guy, and I think the best part about him, he made you feel, no matter who you were the most important person in the room, and that's what I'm going to remember most. Can't wait to see him down the road. Thank you for joining us for this celebration of Gary's amazing career over 35 years in Erie.
And now, a final TV goodbye for our friend and colleague, but his impact on local sports coverage and the community will live on forever. Peace out, Gary D.